Hey everybody, it's time to bring out the E50 again. I haven't played it for a while, and so here we are on Prokhorovka, platooned up with Chief in his Cent 7. I'd run into him on the enemy team and decided he needed a platoon. I certainly needed one too. So, because I'm in the E50, instead of going to the hill, I'm going to do what I've actually done in my few most recent Prokhorovka videos. I'm going to play mid. The reason I'm going to do this is A, the E50, it doesn't lack depression, it just has issues depressing over its front hull. You need to be angled to depress your gun fully, and even then it's not the best depression in the world. So it's not really a hill tank. It also has very, very good armor. And so for those two reasons, I think it would be better used down here, shooting up at the hill and across the map, than on top of the hill where it can't really exploit its armor to the fullest. So I get lit pretty much straight away by this AMX. I was hoping to get a shot in, but unfortunately, you can probably actually see it coming through in the replay, the game wasn't running the best. Usually the opening minutes of the match are kind of jittery for me. Probably something to do with all the mods I have installed. That and the fact the game is relatively unoptimized, because my PC really should be able to run this game quite a lot better than it can. I missed my shot on the T29, but I'm not going to fret about missing a stock tier 7 in a tier 9 match. There are much better targets around. I actually get pretty foolhardy there and roll all the way up, seeing if I can get spots on that Type 64 or any other tank. As you can see, the gun depression's being a bit of a problem there, but I was able to eventually get the shot off and finish their last remaining scout. T30's lit. He's trying to do some tricky shit over the train carriages. Unfortunately for him, I can just shoot under them. And so I'm able to get a shot through his tracks, and now he's missing most of his hit points. He doesn't want to be up on those rails anymore. Take a quick snapshot of Pershing. He was moving slowly enough that even though he was on the other end of the map and he was in the process of relocating, I felt fairly secure in auto-aiming. And again there, he actually stopped, so there was no reason to really stop and get too involved manually aiming it. This is one of the many reasons you should not unbind your auto-aim key. Just rebind it to something else if you want. But anyone who says auto-aim's useless and you should rebind it, or you should unbind it because good players don't use it, is full of shit. Actually, quite a lot of good players do use auto-aim. There are many situations where it's useful. I might actually make a video, not a gameplay video, just like me talking pretty much about auto-aim. I have done it a little bit in some of my videos, but I'd like to go into a bit more depth. And trying to commentate a match and discuss game theory at the same time doesn't really work, because one or the other ends up getting neglected and I forget what I'm talking about. Anyway, T29 is lit on the hill. He's broadside to me. Not that it matters because he just got fucking deleted. T30 and somebody else put a shell into him. Liver's up, he's not moving. Why not auto-aim? The Leopard's spotted. He doesn't appear to have sixth sense, or he's an idiot. And sure enough, he starts backing away after my shot hits him. Now I am relit, probably by that T54, but he's not really scary to me. He's not very well positioned, he can't really do much, and his team aren't in a good sort of setup to do anything about me down here. Although they do have quite a few scary guns still up. They are scattered all over the map, with most of them actually being in the southwest corner and having too much shit to their front to deal with me. However, the Waffenträger and the AMX 5120 are both still up on the hill, and they can get shots at me. Waffenträger has the E100 gun. Unfortunately, I whiffed my shot there. I didn't lead him enough. And once again, did not lead him enough. And once again. I was really agitated by this point. I was hoping he would stop and just let me hit him. Instead, he gets taken down, the AMX rolls out. I managed to high roll the AMX actually, that was pretty high. And then he rolls back. Leopard's been relit. So I take the shot, it hits, and there go all his hit points. It's tracked, so I just hold my aim steady and fire again. That one just whiffs over his tank, fails to hit. Take another blind shot at that position, hoping that he hadn't moved yet, but obviously he had. Foch is taken out before I can traverse my turret around, let alone load my next shell. And the enemy team begins to fall apart at the seams. I may have to reconsider the amount of APCR I carry in this tank. I don't really use it as much anymore. I'm getting a little more confident with my shooting. The gun only has, let's check, about 220 something pen, I think. Yeah, 220 pen exactly. With the AP and with the APCR it's 270. Basically, if you shoot APCR out of this, it's the exact same gun the E50M gets. The 50M, of course, has APCR as its default round, and instead of APCR Premium, it has Heat Premium. But otherwise, it's more or less the same gun. So if you shoot pure gold out of an E50, it's basically just an E50M with less hit points and a frontal transmission. If you don't want to break the bank though, the AP is more than sufficient for most targets. It's just that I don't play this tank so often, and I wasn't really thinking to update the ammo loadout. Tanks that I haven't played in quite a while, often they'll have really weird ammo or equipment setups that don't quite make sense, and the more I play them, the more likely they are to get changed. The E50, the pattern, as in the M46 pattern, not the M48, the, what was the other one? It's another tank that I think tier 9 I always load a first round gold in. I can't recall now, but there are a few tanks I do it in. Just, it's at this point it's more out of habit and superstition than anything else, especially when you consider quite often the first thing I encounter is a light tank, and you certainly don't need gold for lights. It's just a habit. It makes me feel more comfortable, I suppose, if the first shot I have I know is going to pen pretty much anything I face. But I might have to try and break that habit because it's getting expensive and it's kind of stupid. Anyway, this is how you effectively lock down Prokhorovka with an E50. That spot there, as long as they don't get too many tanks on hill, and as long as your tanks basically keep their heads down and prevent them from being able to focus down towards the middle of the map, an E50 in the middle can cause an enormous amount of havoc, just purely because it does have the armor to stand up to hits, and it actually does have quite a good gun. Perhaps not quite as good as Ascent, but pretty fucking good all the same. And honestly, the main disadvantage of it is just the AP. If you load pure gold, it's actually, I think, on par with the Sense gun, if not better. You just don't have the gun depression. E50, very strong tank, very good tank. E50M, similarly, very, very good tank. They don't get a lot of love, they never have from pubbies. Pubbies seem to assume all German tanks are weak and unfairly nerfed, and Russian bias this, and my Kruppstahl that, and all this other fucking bullshit. The E50 has always been a strong tank, always, even since before you could buy premium ammo with credits. It was still a very strong tank. And in light of the recent buffs to the German line, it's even stronger now. Sipolipus, I assume that's how you pronounce his name, the Swiss, I think, goon who plays on EU, between his bat and his E50M, I think those are his two favourite mediums, because those are the ones I see him post replays of all the time. He really loves his E50M. There are a couple other really good players that you see in them all the time as well. I don't play it as much as I used to, mostly because I now have the Scent and the Wheezy 120 and the Object 430 to keep me occupied, but the E50 has always been a tank that I really, really loved from the moment I got it, and it's a tank that I think I'll always enjoy. It's just, a good solid all-round tank, and as I've said in previous videos, going back quite a long time here, it's a pocket heavy, and it's the only one left after the 3601 was changed. You have basically a very highly mobile King Tiger as a tier 9 medium. It's got a very similar sort of layout to the King Tiger, handles like one on crack. It's just a good tank, a good solid tank. And I think that a lot of people that play it tend to overlook that just because it's not the new flavor of the week OP hotness. It doesn't mean it's bad. In fact, it's probably one of the most rock steady, solid carry-worthy tanks in the game. You know, the M46 kind of fell out of favor as power creep left it behind. The Wheezy 120 takes a very good driver to actually use its gun because of the lack of depression. Again, the Cent takes a skilled player, and the T54, although it's still quite strong, is not quite as ridiculously good as it used to be after the armor nerf and the various small changes Wargaming have made to it over the years. The E50 has remained more or less constant. In fact, as far as I can recall, it's only ever been buffed, which actually is the case with most of that line. Both the lines once they get up into the higher tiers. The E75 as well is another tank that I can only ever recall being buffed, except for bug fixes. And so they're very strong tanks, very, very strong tanks. And they're unchanging tanks. So a lot of the time you'll have tanks that they get fucked with and you have to adjust your play style, or suddenly they're not performing as well as they used to, or then they're overperforming, you know, Tiger looking at you, and eventually Wargaming have to do something about it, say either get nerfed back to where they were when they started, or they get nerfed into fucking oblivion, and then the whole process repeats itself. Some tanks get changed so often it's basically a given that every patch something gets done to them. This isn't one of those tanks. The E50 barely ever gets touched. I don't think the E50M has been touched, or at least not since 8.8, and I don't even think it was altered that much then, if at all. So if you want a tank that you know you're going to be able to play no matter what, that you know isn't going to get messed with constantly, you can always trust in its performance, and you're smart enough to know to turn your hull off to about a 40-45 degree angle to depress your gun over the front, get an E50. Honestly, I mean, it has speed, it has pretty decent agility for something as big and as heavy as it is. It's got an excellent gun, very good armor for a medium tank. I mean, it doesn't have camo, but then again, look how big it is. You really don't need camo with that kind of armor. And at 1750 hit points, it's got even more than the Centurion, so it will certainly take a beating. Most tier 9 mediums are hovering in the region of 15 to 1600, if I recall correctly. It's a good all-round tank. Because of its sort of pocket heavy status, it can be used in place of heavies. I know I said actually quite recently I don't like the idea of heavy tanks going to an area and medium tanks going to an area, and you know, you're not allowed to change that. I think that's really stupid sort of puppy logic. But at the same time, there are certain areas where different types of tanks tend to work better than others. The E50, because of its nature, is just a very flexible tank that you can quite happily take into a city map, or you know, go through the city on what's the map I'm thinking of? On fuck. Sorry, I completely lost my train of thought. But yeah, it's Live Oaks, that's it. So, you know, if I've actually uploaded videos of this in the city on Live Oaks. That was when I started, you know, cottoning on to the fact that actually mediums in that city can be quite effective as long as they have survivability, which is why I still don't take my Cent there. It's too big and it needs to be hull down. The Wheezy 120, the 430, this thing in city, because they have relatively good armor, and in the case of the Wheezy and the Object 430, very good camo, they're survivable. And so that flexibility is really nice to have, particularly where a lot of the other mediums are sort of hyper-specialized. For example, the Wheezy 120 is hyper-specialized towards putting out big hits, but only on flat terrain. The Centurion is optimized towards putting out big hits at a long distance on anything, but heaven forbid you be on flat ground. And then, you know, the Patton's mobile, not mobile, sorry, it's decently mobile, but it's accurate on the move, that's what I mean to say. And so, you know, the Patton fires on the move well. It's good for pushing a flank and firing as you go and not getting bogged down. The T-54 is obviously just a fucking death machine, but in light of its recent nerfs, its survivability's gone down a little bit. This thing is just, it's whatever you want it to be. It can be a spearhead heavy tank, sort of. You know, obviously it doesn't have the hit points and armor of a true tier 9 heavy, but it has roughly equivalent armor and hit points to a tier 8 heavy. In fact, it has more hit points than most tier 8 heavies, I think. So you can still use that to your advantage. You can still use it as a stand-in for a, you know, a decent heavy if you need to. Or you could use it as a medium tank. Its accuracy on the move isn't too awful. I mean, it's nothing to write home about, but it's certainly not the worst. And so it can be used to fire on the move during an assault. It's very fast for something this big. It's just a good all-round tank. I honestly, now I think about it, I can't think of a single real fault this tank has that's worth mentioning. I mean, the gun depression thing is pretty much a non-issue because it does traverse quite rapidly on its tracks. You can just swing your whole either side to get the gun down. And, you know, the frontal transmission's not an issue anymore. Those no longer catch fire. Even when it was, it's pretty easy to just go hull down. And because the E50 has such steep slopes on upper and lower front plates, it was actually a lot safer than some of the other German tanks, and in fact many of the other tanks with frontal transmissions. It's flexible. I like that in a tank. It's a really good thing to have, and I think probably for pub matches it's one of the strongest mediums there is. I know Sipolipus has said this before. The topic of the Leopard came up. Specifically the topic of the Leopard in pub matches. The Leopard 1 is an excellent tank. It's just a really, really nice tank. It's fast, it's mobile, it's got pretty decent camera, it's got an excellent gun, good gun handling. The problem is the Leopard has absolutely fuck all armor. It's not survivable at all. The first thing that sees it is probably going to ammo rack it from the front because it has a big frontal ammo rack and no armor in front of it. And that's a problem. Now certainly you can make the Leopard 1 work in pub matches, even I can sometimes. I've seen all sorts of G players and, you know, Havoc and Chai and all of them in them, and they do alright. The problem is you can't afford to take hits, and sometimes with pubbies you just need to be able to afford to take hits because the pubbies won't do it for you. They'll try and use you as a meat shield. And particularly if you are the last person left and you don't have armor and you don't have hit points, you're fucked. Whereas the E50, it might not have the Leopard's comparative stealthiness, it might not have quite such an amazing gun. I'm talking here the E50M, obviously. The Leopard PTA is actually just demonstrably worse than the E50 in pretty much every respect. Your gun handling might not be quite as good, but it's still pretty fucking good, and you have armor, you have hit points, you still have decent mobility and agility, not quite as good as the Leopard, but, you know, passable, better than a lot of tanks. And so the E50M can carry a lot of games that a Leopard couldn't possibly carry. And the same is true of the E50. You can pull off games in an E50 that a Patton or a Cent or, you know, a Wheezy 120, maybe even a T-54. I know I'm pushing my luck here, but maybe even a T-54. Games they wouldn't even have a hope of carrying, just because you have that all-round strength in your tank. I mean, if I was going to use one word to describe this thing other than versatile, it would be strong. Strong in armor, strong in gun, just... I really like this tank. I'm going to stop trying. I can't put into words adequately. I'm so inarticulate at the moment, but this tank, it's fucking good. Get one. Alright, I hope you enjoyed that video, and as ever there will be more coming. Thanks for watching, and I wish you the best of luck in the field. See you next time.